My name's Mike Farah, Farah. It's a Palestinian word. It means happiness, actually. Our family go back to thousands of years before Jesus was born, actually. And prior to the Nakba of 1948, they were heavily involved, like many people in Palestine, in the orange and fruit industry, contrary to Ben-Gurion's statement. The land for a people without a land. Well, we proved a lie to that. And during the Hasfalah agreement, even I think it was Himmler came back and when the Zionists approached and said, yes, it's beautiful. She's a beautiful bride, but she's already taken. And so my father, as with many Arab families, very large families, they played with the Christians, the Muslims, the Hindus and the Jews quite happily before the advent of Zionism and the terrorism that took place and the horrendous massacres. And his aunt was burnt alive, etc. So he saw some terrible things. He worked for British intelligence, not that he got much thanks for it, but he did. He was involved in cleaning up the scrap metal after the desert campaign. He got a contract with that. Him and his brother, my Uncle Eddie.
Okay, so when did he come over to Britain?
Well, it would have been in the 50s. No, he was actually he was in Britain during the Blitz, actually, for a period of time. And I'm not quite sure. When he met my mum, she was Lavinia. She was a twin, blonde. Her sister was a redhead. And they were refugees from Russia, Poland descent. And they don't actually know their actual name, but we've got a picture of her from her Russian parents, but we're still obviously they were very well off Russians, so it's something to do with the Russian Revolution and
okay.
And then anyway they arrived as refugees just prior to the war, and Rini and Lavinia, and they were given the Polish name. They were brought actually up in Manchester, which is a favourite haunt of mine. Beautiful people over in Manchester, the Mancunians. And the Polish family took them in, and her uncle was a Lancaster bomber, her step-uncle or whatever. But she used to, the story goes that they used to run off because they wanted to be on the stage. And they were Tiller girls at the London Palladium, what have you.
Okay, so when your dad arrived, you were actually brought up in Weybridge in Surrey.
Yes, I was born in London, and my mother said, I want to live in the countryside. And so my dad came, he having had a business in Libya, which they had, having got refugee twice, effectively, once from Palestine, they set up a business in Libya, which is very successful. Then Gaddafi kicked off, and they had to leave again. And fortunately, Uncle Eddie had connections here. They set up a business in London. And that's how my dad eventually came to London. That's how my dad met my mum, who was, they were Tiller girls on the London Palladium, the pair of them. They were quite showgirls and quite beautiful. And so I was born, myself got an older sister, and I was born in St Thomas's, actually. And we lived in Chelsea for a while, and then my mum got tired of the city, said I want to go out to find the country. At that time, of course, Weybridge was positive greenbelt. It was must have looked like the nectar fields of honey, And so my dad commissioned a house to be brought and to be designed and what have you. And we lived there for the most of my childhood. And they sent us to, I was sent to St George's College in Weybridge, and Gabrielle, my elder sister, was sent to St Maur's. And the two schools merged in the end. So she was in the sixth form of St George's College, and I was in the 2 years below her. And so I didn't get on very well neither did Gabrielle really, because the private school system, to my mind, it certainly didn't serve me well, and I noticed a lot of abuse going on, and it didn't produce very nice people. I'm not denigrating that there are very good people as well in those schools, and but it wasn't a happy schooling by any chance. We certainly had a paedophile there called Mr. Singer, who was a maths teacher who I had the pleasure of meeting in the unemployment office, and they kept it all hush hush, and we cut one or two of the priests as well, and I did notice the priests had quite a nice time with taking the sixth form out for dinner quite often, but I can't say anything. My claim to fame really is I've been caned twice. Mr. Singer got me the cane for 13 buff cards because I'm completely dyslexic and couldn't add up to save my life. I was a very slow learner. I didn't actually learn to read properly till about 12. I was a slow developer, and so they used to give you these buff cards, and if you got two of them in a row, you could possibly be up for a caning. So Father Francis would come round and he'd look in the window and he'd go, you outside my office. So I had this going on for 13 weeks, or whatever it is, Every Friday I would be absolutely breaking it, wondering whether or not I was going to get the cane, 6 of the best, and that would have been, about 7 years of age then. Horrific thing to do to people. And of course it happened, So, and then the second time I got the cane was one of the boys had the hots for my sister. He was a head boy, not a head boy, a prefect. And he knew that I was writing up with the band. The first band I had was called Moonstone, actually, and they spent most of my time up in the music rooms and writing music, and we used to smoke up there as well, you see. And they just issued a decree that anyone that caught smoking get the cane. Now I was 16 and a half, 17 it would have been, yeah. So next thing we know, this guy clocked us, and it was his way of getting back at me. And there we are, all in front of Father Iltert. Now, we get 6 of the best there, you see, and only to find that a week later he's run off with a French mistress. Yeah, I don't blame him. She was a very attractive woman, but it was just the hypocrisy of it. I never got on with it. I was the only person in the whole year that wasn't made a head boy, which I took as a kind of accolade, really.
Yeah. Anyway, look, can you tell us a bit about Weybridge and the association with the Civil War?
Oh yes, and this is something they didn't teach you at like many. The word education really is just it means to draw out, but they stuff stuff into you, but they don't actually teach you the relevant parts of history. It's what the victors want you to know. It's knowledge is power. Yeah, 1649, Gerald Winstanley, the earliest record in history in the British Isles of socialism, and it's basically what happened was after the English Civil War, like a lot of revolutions, I suppose, it was meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So all the new model army people and all the people who fought against the royalists, etc., they thought they were going to be having this new Jerusalem, and in fact it didn't turn out quite the way they thought, And so Gerald Winstanley, who had supported the uprising there were several others, there was the Levellers and the Diggers and what have you, who wanted basically what's in the Magna Carta, personal sovereignty, and which is in fact the only law of this land. We are all sovereign beings. Everything else is statute, and that is not. There's a fine divide between lawful and legal, and the Magna Carta is lawful, statute is legal, and that's where people find that it's sometimes hard to understand that. So basically, he formed a self-sufficiency commune, and this is like a real irony of history, really. It's history's got funny tricks. The golf course in St George's Hills, Weybridge in Surrey, where the Beatles used to live. In fact, I used to play up in an empty squat called the Maharishis. My goodness me, we used to have raves up there back in the day. I even went down one of their own. I found myself in one of their nuclear. At the time, it was the height of the Cold War. They had their own private nuclear bunker, even by the water tower. I just travelled down there and had a look, nosy around, and. But anyway, up in there, St George's Hills was where on the golf course is where Gerald Winstanley formed the commune. And of course, the local vicar, who was at that particular period in history, the vicar would have been like the mainstream media. That's, if you didn't turn up to church, you could be punished because you weren't going to be hearing what you needed to be told, much like the BBC. And so he organised the militia to turf them off. And I have a bit of a link with that because when I met my wife, I'm trained horticulturalist and conservationist. But when I met my wife, we lived in Weybridge and we were very against the poll tax. And very active. In fact, we helped change the law on the grounds of living of distress. We get thousands of people out of jail, and and we were also involved with C&D. That was going down at the time. It was the time of the Greenham Common Women, and Mrs. Thatcher was closing all the mines down, etc. So sadly. We used to go out chasing cruise missiles like hunt saboteurs would do, and we would know when to go out because all our phone lines would be cut. So we would know that was the point to go and rendezvous and find out where the cruise missiles were travelling through the British countryside. And let's face it, the whole ethos that these convoys of cruise missiles of American vehicles, which are much larger anyway, could ride and melt into the British countryside. The Russians ideally weren't going to know anything about it. It was complete nonsense anyway. But they were stationed at Greenham Common, which is a common land. And is to the work of the Greenham Common Women, of which my dearly departed wife, who died early this year, was one, a proud Greenham Common woman. It is now common land, and they won't tell you anything of it. They'll take all the credit all the time. But we were having negotiations with the Russians. The peace movement were having as many negotiations with the Russians as the diplomats were. So there was significant barriers were broken in terms of trusting each other, hands across the sea or whatever. So one night they'd gone down there and they got arrested and they were dropped off in the red light district of Portsmouth by the military police. And I was working at St Joseph's Special Needs School in Cranley at the time. And so I got a call and I went off and picked them up we went off and picked them up at 5 o'clock in the red light district where they'd been found, only to find out that they had been assaulted and they had been held in a pit in the ground. It was actually brought up in Parliament. It did make a bit of a stink in the press at the time. And they were taken out one by one and they were told they were going to be shot. And we said, we can't do that. We can't do that. We're British. The Yanks were having that. No, we're going to shoot you. And that's hands up. And
sorry, were the Americans saying this or the British forces?
No, the Americans were saying it. They said it to one of the women. They said, we're going to shoot you.
Okay, so roughly what year was this roughly then?
Well, this would have been, oh crikey, the early 80s, wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, early
Well,
80s.
obviously, I mean, it's an interesting place to have been brought up around Weybridge and also around the time of Greenham Common. But look, let's get more up to date because I know you've also been involved in very important work,
Mm.
charity work, in supporting the Palestinian cause. Obviously, with your father being Palestinian himself and having come over here basically chased out by the Israeli state, you know. So, how has that been going? I know the actual charity itself is called the Worldwide Resistance and Help. So why is it called Worldwide Resistance Help?
Right. Okay. It's called Worldwide Resistance to and help us. In fact, I'm writing a jingle, a song for it, and it's to help us fight poverty. Okay, so it's worldwide resistance to poverty, to inhumanity, to injustice, to everything that.
Okay, so I mean, why
Yeah.
do you feel it's so important to be raising money here in Europe for Palestine?
Oh my God, it's more important now than it could possibly ever be. Donald Trump is a Zionist on steroids, a serial bankrupt Zionist on steroids. He's funded by Sheldon Adelson. His son, son-in-law, Jared Kushner, he's got investments in the illegal settlements. He's quoted by Bibi as being the best thing that's ever happened to Israel. And they've got, because the Zionists rewrit the Scroll Bible, you've got all these born-again people thinking that God has raised him up and is going to bring about the second coming and their rapture, and they must have the Alaska Mosque and this and the other. That's Sheldon Adelson gave Trump the money on the condition that he gave the Zionists Jerusalem, which was completely flouting all international agreements, whatever. And anyway, so one of the first things Trump did when he came to office was he slashed all money into UNRWA, which is the United Nations Fund specifically for refugees. And the refugee population of Palestine is one of the largest in the world. It's about between 10 and 12 million. I mean, just to give you an idea, back in 1922, the Muslim population was 78.34%. That was 589,177. The Jews consisted of 11.14%, 83,790. Christians, 9.5, 71%. 460,000, and the others were 1.0, about 7.617. That was back in 1922. By the time 1948 came about, the Nakba, which is referred to as the catastrophe, we hear an awful lot about the Holocaust, but what we don't hear, and indeed hardly even allowed to mention it, doesn't the ongoing Nakba of the Palestinians. And so we have a population now of about 10 to 12 million who have a right of return. The United Nations Resolution 194 gives them the right to return. You may be aware of the horrific scenes that took place during the Great Return March, where you had snipers lined up. It takes 3 people to take one shot for a sniper, okay? And in actual fact, there was more people injured in the entire Great Return March than through what the Russell report referred to when Janine founded the charity Worldwide Resistance, which spurred her on. which was called Operation Protective Edge. That one, there was more casualties and more people injured and murdered. I don't know about the actual death rates, but there was the casualties were just horrific.
Well, I think, look, I mean, looking at the casualties for Operation Protective Edge. Now, this was Easter 2018, I believe, and it went on and on for months.
Yes.
There were something like 200 shot dead. Now, this is literally for just walking across a piece of land. I mean, they weren't actually threatening anything other than just basically walking onto some land which has been stolen from them. And something like 9,000 were hit by shrapnel, including 6,100 seriously injured by snipers. So this was a pretty horrific act. And that sounds to me like you're saying that's where the Worldwide Resistance Charity started.
No, are we talking about, you're talking about the Great Return March? No, we started before the Great Return March. We started Operation Protective Edge.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah, which was several years before. But I think there's been, because Gaza's now in lockdown, lockdown is a very mild term for what Gaza's going through. They've been under a brutal barbaric siege for the last 14 years. And you talk to anybody and they say, well, they can't even fish off their own shorelines. In fact, they've just reduced if a fisherman goes out, he runs the risk of being shot. They keep reducing it. I think it was 15 miles offshore, then it was 10, then it was 5, and now they've cut it completely.
Okay, look, let me just go back to Protective Edge as well, because I think it's important we're clear about this. The Protective Edge, that was 2014, wasn't it? Yes. July 2014. I think I can remember myself going out into Bristol city centre, something which you're not really supposed to do when you're locked down. Obviously, we wouldn't be supposed to be doing that sort of thing now, although, of course, some groups will continue to do that.
Well, this is the whole point of the lockdown.
And it's just important, I think, to explain that there were 2,300 roughly killed in that, basically a bombardment with aircraft and artillery.
They issued the Hannibal Directive on one area. The Hannibal Directive is because, it's crazy to call it a war, really, because which is what it's so often referred to, because you have to remind yourself there's 2.1 million people in the largest concentration camp on the face of the earth. Nothing gets in or nothing gets out unless Israel lets them have it. They count things. There's been a thing here in Wales. People have been up in arms because the diktat, they've tried to pin it on the Welsh government, but they're just following the script from Bill Gates's World Health Authority. He's written the script for all of this, and this is what, if you read it, you'll find out what's coming next week in which area. It's almost just plays like a book. You read it here, it happens there next week. But they'll deny. They've got a calorie count. The Israelis even have a calorie count, and they deliberately allow the calories in. You can't believe how malicious they are. I brought one of the parkour teams what are those cameras called where you strap them to your body? I've forgotten what they're called. Do you know the ones I mean? Like you see them if you're parachuting out of an aircraft and you strap them on, and a GoPro, that's it. I brought one of them, and we were umming and ahhing how to take it through and get it to him, and his friend took it through for him, and the Israeli just took it out of his satchel and stole it off him, and it didn't get to him. So, they just steal things. But going back to what happened, I mean, that was the case where they in fact, I saw one of my family shot live on the news. There's 7,000 Farahs in Gaza, And people got to realise that Gaza's not much bigger than Anglesey or the Isle of Wight, and there's 2-point-something million there. At that particular time, they were bombing hospitals, they were bombing schools, they bombed the children on the beach. And the guy who I'm mentioning is a guy called, well, his name means safe in English, and he was looking for his for survivors in the rubble after there'd been the horrendous bombardments. And all the activists, of course, were up all night trying to wake the world up to what was going on and being completely ignored as usual. But this actually made, because I actually know, I know the guy who took the footage. I'm trying to remember his name. He's gone. I'm sorry, but I'd like to credit him for it. But he actually took the footage, and they were looking for survivors of the families in the rubble. And the Israelis had deliberately left behind snipers in the rubble. And he was looking for his mum, calling for his mum. And I watched it. I cried my eyes out. I couldn't believe I was watching this. And he got shot. And he was shot once. And he was, and then you heard him go, Allah, 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 Allah. And then they did the kill shot. And that was on Channel 4 News. And when I saw that, and I knew the guy, I can't tell you how I felt. I can't tell you. I was, well, like so many people around the world, well, I didn't need awakening, but what that did was so many people then poured into the Palestinian issue because they realized the injustice of what was going on. But how much of Palestinians' pain has to be written in their blood before people sit up and take notice. And that was, and then of course that was the same time that you had the shelling of the children playing football on the beach outside the hotel where most of the correspondents were staying. And I remember Jon Snow interviewing their spokesperson, and he's saying, well, this must have been deliberate. Of course it must have been deliberate. And he said, oh, no, it's a mistake. He said, are you telling me that you couldn't clearly see that these were children playing on the beach? And it was so ludicrous to think that one of the most heavily armed, I think the 5th largest army in the world, the most sophisticated weapon systems. I mean, they could spot from their drones a scorpion running across the desert, you know, that they couldn't work out. These kids were playing football on the beach and they just shelled them, blew them to bits. And that was horrific. Another war crime that took place then. And oh my God. And then they have the Hannibal Directive. And the Hannibal Directive, what Gaza does have is an armed militia called Hamas, who are, which brings us on to the predicament that we're in. Hamas are by some countries classified as a terror organization. Now, I don't get involved in the politics of it, but they are part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood was actually funded and aided by Israel. And Netanyahu is on record as saying that we need Hamas in order to stop the creation of a Palestinian state. And he's on record as saying that. And every time he needs a little bit of jingoism, he just stirs something up. And then we had, of course, the wonderful, in fact, I wrote an article about it with Ariane Love, 3 articles, and which was The Future Belongs to Palestine, and we were documenting what was happening. And
I mean, one of the big problems over there was 2008-9, wasn't it? A bit before what we're talking about, but that was the Operation Cast Lead, which I can remember pretty well. This was the horrific attack on Gaza City with airstrikes, with artillery against civilians, schools and hospitals and housing blocks all smashed to pieces, demolished. And one of the things that shocked me at the time was that we then had an appeal put out by the Disasters Emergency Committee, which is an umbrella group of 13 charities, the Red Cross, Christian Aid, Oxfam, Save the Children, etc., etc. And the BBC blocked this being shown. I mean, that appeals like this can raise, say, for example, around about 10 million, 20 million pounds, as some have done for the Congo and Burma and places like that in the past. So this could have been a real help, charitable help. Same sort of thing you were doing, but it's quite obvious to me that the Zionist lobby, the Israel lobby within the BBC, it makes sure that the coverage is constantly skewed about what's going on there, and that really the atrocious war crimes and abuses of human rights, racism, etc., doesn't get reported at all here. And maybe one side does, the other side doesn't. But look, I know one of the things that's happened to your charity, the Worldwide Resistance, is that earlier this year, you were raided at your base in Germany. So can you tell us a bit about that? Because that, I mean,
I certainly will.
Stopping people knowing about this.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing that's going on, is it? There's also an attempt to stop money. As I said, with this BBC blocking this Disasters Emergency Committee.
Well, that was the one where Tony Benn was on the show, wasn't he? And he absolutely took the BBC to task over it. I remember that very well. But it's happened. I mean, it's been getting increasingly worse. I mean, it was similar situations during the Greenham Common days and the Poltex days. They were just like mouthpieces for the government that entire time. And you're seeing it today with the reporting of the Save Our Rights people in terms of the COVID virus stuff, because it's all about crushing freedom, crushing information, censorship. And
but what I'm interested in is the charity work, because people want to give some money to help.
Exactly.
People that are having
Exactly. Okay. So well, let's get on to it then. So on April 12th last year, Janine, along with 90 other families, Anti International and Worldwide Resistance, were raided. 90 families. Janine and people on board, another man called Thomas Eggers. He runs his own private business on his computer. He's an events organizer. And Janine is a dental technician, and she works so hard.
So whereabouts is she? In the UK?
No, she lives. She's a white Christian. Although her name's Janine Abouai, she's actually white Christian, native-born German. She lives in Dusseldorf, and she literally runs the whole thing from a two-bedroomed flat in Dusseldorf, so she's after the protective edge. She woke up and she's such a kind-hearted, hard-working individual. She thought, well, I've got to do something. She's so dynamic, beautiful soul, and so she started. She got all her friends, well, all the people. If she sets her mind to do something, she'll do it. And she got in touch with all sorts of people and what have you, and formed the charity. And she had contacts with the Muslim charity Ansar International, who are much bigger than us, and they are in Syria. Virtually any war-torn African country, you'll find Ansar International. And the German banks are the German authorities are pretty, I suppose, because of the Holocaust or whatever, but there's a huge pro-Zionist lobby in Germany. And so Ansar International would open a bank account and they would close it down. They said, well, we're not having your money. You know, they were disabling them from giving their bona fide money to the people on the ground, the orphans, the hungry, the needy, the poor. And so we partnered with them, which enabled their donations to go to where they needed to go. And that's all above board or whatever. We got no worries as long as we get a just trial. And so and so 6 o'clock in the morning, Janine's still in bed. There's a half a dozen armed police storming the place, start taking the place apart. They took all her personal computing devices, telephones, even paperwork belonging to her father, who was dying in hospital at the time, which she needed desperately. Just stole what they wanted. Terrified the life out of the cats. Janine was utterly shocked and horrified because she couldn't imagine what on earth was going on. The next thing, the press turned up, printed a picture of her house and the number of her flat. Just down the road from her are the most extreme right-wing Islamophobes you can imagine. So they literally put her in danger. They wall-to-wall coverage across the Reuters script is just incredible, because every single paper had virtually the same story. But they headlined one of our projects, which we just finished. It broke my heart because we spent hours working on it, and it was a lovely project actually, because it was clay ovens on which they could cook, and we would supply them with the flour and what have you. So every family would get one of these ovens made in Gaza, and the kind of thing you'd quite like to have in your own garden, really, a bit like a pizza oven, you know, but a bit more. Just a bit more, but could literally be made in Gaza, and they would get several bags of flour and whatever to make the bread with, and indeed they would be able to sell the bread. So it was give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish, feed them for life, and it was that kind of a project. That was on the television. At the same time, they said Gaza Charity, Worldwide Resistance have been raided, dawn raids along with Ansar International, and for funding, for promoting, I'll never forget it, promoting hate and funding terror. I mean, you couldn't make up more Orwellian double.
Okay, well, what about the banks, though? Because having your bank accounts closed is one thing. Did they actually also seize the money in those accounts? Or
well. With Ansar International, they not only did that, they took money that was personal money that for people that were going on a holiday, and there were children involved. There were 90 families involved, and they had children. One family had the doors blown off their house, the front of their house. Another family was a pack of dogs arrived. And they stormed in, and they said, sit down. They're pointing guns everywhere. They asked the woman in the house to go and get something. She got up from the chair. The guy said, sit down, I'll shoot you. You know, I mean, it was just horrific. Anyway, they took all their stuff as well. And the answer to that is yes, with our bank accounts are totally frozen. We were having trouble anyway with bank accounts. Every time we'd set up a project, the bank wouldn't give us a reason why they wouldn't take our money, our donations. And Janine had to fly to the Netherlands at one point, and we were setting up a bank there. And the same thing. So obviously they were making life increasingly difficult for us, even to the point that we had like a week to lodge. In German law, I can't really get my head around it, but basically, in order to hire a solicitor, Nagler is our solicitor, we're separated. The two cases are separate, Ansar and whatever are separate. We're not really anything to do with each other. But even to the point where Janine, we're not wealthy. We're not a huge charity. I mean, we're talking small projects, maybe 5,000 here, 300 here, 500. We even tried to raise money for a journalist who was shot on the Great Return March with an explosive bullet and trying to save his leg, you know. Internationally banned explosive bullets. They were in that march, incidentally. They were shooting children, they were shooting women, they were shooting the disabled, murdering these were the disabled. The medics, that beautiful girl, Roseanne Hajar, the medic who was on Time magazine, who only wanted to be a medic. And journalists were being shot, doctors were being shot, the old and the young. And these were people hundreds of yards from the fence. And it's their land, and they're walking towards the fence, that's all. And the tear gassing even the medic stations well within hundreds of yards away from the apartheid fence.
Yes. So we had just 1 minute. Hang on, because you've got the accusation, isn't it, that you're supporting Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation. In fact, the German government has declared it as a terrorist organisation.
Yes, that's what they're saying. And
admittedly, they only said it was you were alleged to be supporting a terrorist organisation, but they raided you, I suppose, to see whether or not you were.
They certainly. If I could send you the press cuttings, and you'd see that we're guilty by press, basically. You know but the reason the fact is we don't have anything to do with Hamas. That's the other side of it. As far as we can see, is all their evidence is taken off of Facebook posts. So, for example, you might have a WWR organization next to another charity that is affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood, who is also a charity, an Islamic charity. Now, if there's a photograph and our banner happens to get taken close to their banner and they're doing a project and we're doing a project, that doesn't mean to say that we're funding terrorism by any stretch of the imagination. I can tell you
what measures do you take to make sure that you're not?
Well, we go to extensive lengths to make sure that the people that we deal with working on the ground, and in fact, we've got a signed affidavit from the Palestinian legal authority, which is recognized by the international courts, where everybody has said that nobody has ever, nor would they, etc., that we have worked with have anything to do with Hamas. And when Janine makes a contact, it's the first questions that they're asked, you know. But I mean, how much more due diligence can you do if you want to get money into a war-torn area? I don't know what you're expected to do.
Well, okay, so how was the raids on the 10th of April last year, 2019, how has it affected the charitable work?
It's completely, I mean, the real victims of all of this is that it's all come to a halt at exactly the same time as the Trump's decided to halt all aid to UNRWA. At exactly the same time, the steal of the century is being put through. Deal of the century, I call it the steal of the century. It's all designed to put the Palestinians on their knees so that they'll accept a few tins of paint to redecorate their cells with, if you get my metaphor. It's a theft, it's a land grab, is what it is. And this is all being politically motivated, but it's not just, again, how difficult it was just for our defense solicitor to get the money to start our case rolling. We had a week to do it, and all Janine's accounts were closed down, so we had to do it Telegram. To do Telegram, I had to drive from here 38 miles, and out of my own pocket, I telegrammed through, I think it was £1,200, something like that, because that was just to get the solicitor on the case and to lodge our defence. So I rushed down there, got it through Telegram. I thought, phew, thank God it's got through. Janine, you got it? Yes, it's here. It's arrived. Big relief. And then I thought, right, I'll go down to the seafront for a bit and just chill out. Got a phone call back from Janine. Oh, no, they won't let me have it. I said, what do you mean they won't let you have it? Even Telegram would give us the money for Janine to be able to defend herself.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, I mean, obviously the upshot has been it's pretty much stymied much of your charitable work you're doing for Gaza. But what about the what they call Hasbara? Because this is a sort of technique that the Israel lobby use.
Yeah, I'll just finish how we did get the money through. So eventually what I did was I went to the NatWest and transferred the money directly to the solicitor. But yes, the Hasbara, Hasbara simply means PR. They're highly paid people. You meet a lot of them on social media. Some of them are paid by Israel to spend time on they'll get their education paid while they're at university, and part of that is spending time just on Facebook. That's one way they operate, where they just troll people and report people and get their accounts closed down. The other end of it is you've got people like David Lang from Israeli Cool, who's currently targeted a beautiful woman, Saskia Whitfield, and he said to her, it can go from, it doesn't matter who you are, you can be Jeremy Corbyn, or you can be just a decent, honest person who knows justice and truth when they see it, and knows right from wrong, and knows their history and is well researched, is what Saskia is. And so this is Israeli Cool guy. He's clearly paid by as a Hasbara, and he runs this group called Israeli Cool. He wrote to all. She's self-employed graphic design. He wrote to all of her employers on the website and said, "Do you realise you're employing an anti-Semite? Do you realise it's something like that?" Yeah. And without anybody questioning, they all write back and say, "Well, you know, you're an anti-Semite, you're an anti." You don't even get. It's like when Facebook blocks your account. You don't actually get a reason why sometimes, you know. And so that's destroyed her career. And she's just trying to make a living, an ordinary person who cares. That's how evil these things people are. The most telling influence in Britain was I urge people to watch it in the Al Jazeera program, The Lobby. And I think it's in 3 sections. Of course, in our free country, they couldn't show it on Al Jazeera, but you can look it up on Google it. It's called The Lobby, Al Jazeera. It's very revealing. It shows direct intervention by the Israeli government in British democracy. It shows an Israeli diplomat having words with British politicos, and he's saying, what have you got for me today? How can we take down so-and-so? How can we take down this and the other? That was all to destroy Corbyn. Then, of course, you've got the bribes, come to Israel, we'll give you, neighbour friends of Israel will get given jolly trips over there. Did you know the policewoman, Chezi Dick, she has been to Israel for training just recently? Yeah, the Met. She's in charge of the Met. Chezi Dick is her name. And she's had these meetings in secret. There's no minutes or anything with the Israelis as to how to police the COVID situation. That's how thick it is. The people who administer the tests for COVID haven't even, and have been told by the inventor that they're not fit for purpose. He's sadly now died. But even by the government's own standards, they've got a 1 in 10 chance of being accurate. They're producing, I saw a video on Facebook where one guy just said, yeah, I got the test, did nothing with it, put it back in the bottle, sent it back. Guess what? Came back positive. So when you're hearing these tests coming back, positive, how many of those are false positives?
So, I mean, it's interesting you're linking, some of your work to this whole pandemic. What do you think is, if there really is a link, what is the link?
I think there's several links because, Big Pharma is largely run by companies that have a huge Zionist influence. All the people who, the big pharmaceutical companies, whatever, they're heavily involved. So there's a lot of money being made out of it. A direct link is an organization called Serco, which administers the tests and has been given billions and billions of pounds of public money. And they are employing more people than the Ministry of Defence. And there's so many subsidiaries, one of which is G4S. G4S trained the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, but also this Serco has so many military defence contracts in all sorts of countries. They run the entire Middle East transport network. They run a state-of-the-art satellite system. They're actually on the board. Bill Gates donates billions to them. Mind you, Bill Gates donates to everybody. He virtually owns the WHO. He owns the World Bank. He owns the people who are advising the government as we stand. He's got millions invested in the Serco, and Serco on their directorate further up the chain is you've got Soames. Soames is the son of Churchill. Soames is also the guy who rung up Diana and said, don't get involved in, this was on record, her friend was in the room at the time, don't get involved in landmines, Diana, and you might find something terrible could happen. And of course, he's heavily invested in landmines, but also what a lot of people didn't realise, and my sister went to school, her children went to school with the Fayyads. I mean, obviously, the British Goldman Sachs Gotha regime don't want to be married to a Muslim. So that was a tricky situation.
Anyway, look, where are we heading with the lockdown?
Well, what I'm trying to say is the Crown of England.
Hang on. Yeah. It looks to me as if the government here, certainly the same has been happening in Germany and France this week, The UK government is doing everything it can to bring in this second kind of Christmas lockdown, which may last right through until the next spring. So where do you see all this heading?
Well, it's basically you could read several documents which will tell you exactly where it's heading. There's one written by Rockefeller called Lockstep. There was an exercise last October, Event 201. It's all linked into Agenda 30 and Agenda 21, and it's heading where it's heading. It's a boiling frog situation. Okay, we've been gaslighted. The figures that we're getting, the Center for Disease Control issued a reassessment of the figures in America, for example. And they're still quoting the wrong figures, incidentally, because you go to the website and it's actually 6% of what they're quoting. And they're quoting them in the hundreds of thousands. But what people don't realize is that we all have COVID. It's natural. It's the common cold, basically. We all have it. And American doctors were getting paid to register COVID deaths. And almost everybody dies of COVID. You could have cancer anyway, but the nail in the coffin is the COVID virus that would finish you off. So it's very clever. It's very clever indeed. But I saw a press conference, and the press asked the spokesperson, so are you telling me that if a person dies in a motorcycle accident, they test positive, he dies as a COVID death? And she said yes. And they weren't making any secret of it. So where it's heading is, it's heading to horrible places. I mean, freedom of assembly, freedom, just basic freedoms. This is real Orwellian, dystopian, dark stuff. New world order, corporate, fascist, globalist police state. And it's heading down a model where many people will not want to take a vaccine because they know that it's got genetic material in it. The moment that genetic material goes into your body, it alters your DNA. You have the eugenicist Bill Gates, who's heavily invested in Monsanto and genetically modifying. That DNA that goes into your body will alter your unique genetic code. So you'll no longer be the person you are. It's a population control agenda. There's no question about that. They're making a killing in the process through the useless testing going to crony companies. And at the same time, they're putting small businesses out of business. So the disaster capitalists can step in and buy everything up on the cheap. Everybody will then be very much beholden to, if you want a job, well, have you been tested? Have you got a vaccine? That will be the way I could see it possibly going. Well, alongside that, gone through Parliament just recently, is something so maliciously evil I cannot begin to describe. It's an act called the Covert Intelligence and Overseas Operations Act. Now, this basically, and the British veterans think that it's going to help them, but if they actually examine the small print, they'll realize it's designed to do them out of compensation as well. Now, if I can just explain to you what this act does, and bearing in mind the government's already got form of infiltrating environmentalists, where we now have children who ask their mums, "Who is my daddy?" "Oh, well, it's somebody I fell in love with when I was involved in the Green Movement, and turned out he was married and he was working for the state." That's one piece of form. We've got it in, they work for the IRA and they kill people and what have you as well. There's others. There's countless others as well could go into, but those are the famous ones. So what this act does is it's giving the British government immunity from prosecution. Not just the British government, you would think the security services, whatever, but it's so far-reaching. It goes to the Environment Agency all the way through to the Gaming Authority. I cannot for the life of me understand why they would need them.
I mean, it sounds to me like you're talking about a police state.
Absolutely, because they are given the powers. This act are terrifying, absolutely terrifying. They are giving themselves immunity from prosecution for murder, immunity from prosecution for rape, immunity from prosecution for paedophilia, immunity for prosecution for war crimes. In other words, and that is on the basis of a threat to national security, economic security, or, and I quote, intent to create disorder. I mean, it is so vague and with so few checks, and the government has said, "Oh, it's okay, it's all covered by the Human Rights Act." That is a complete smokescreen.
Well, it always seems to me that the act itself is designed to create disorder. But anyway, Mike Farah, thank you very much for joining us. If people want to find your work and follow the charity, whereabouts can they do that?
Well, the charity website is WWR-HELP.com. That's the website. And on that website, you'll see it says petition, and there's the story translated from German in there. It'll tell you a bit about it. They can contact me on Facebook, or they can contact me on my email address, which is Mike Farah, MikeFarah, LEAF 2007 at gmail.com. If anybody wants to help with the legal fees, I can point you directly to the solicitor Nagler, so it wouldn't even go through my hands. But right now we have a justice fund. On Facebook, on my page, if you hashtag justice 4 for WWR, then you will see a whole host of articles and things relevant to what we've been discussing tonight, Tony.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I mean, I just want to round off by reminding everybody that there is a social media campaign against Palestine, and I'll put a link up to it on our show page at thisweek.org.uk. For example, one quite well-known website is saying the social media's erasure of Palestinians is a grim warning for our future. Facebook, Google and Twitter are not neutral platforms. They control the digital public square to aid the powerful and can cancel any of us overnight. That's literally just a web page that's popped up on the Palestine team website. That's vpalestine.org. Just in the last few days. In a new Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, former Silicon Valley executives warn of a dystopian future with Google, Facebook and Twitter gathering vast quantities of data on us to better predict and manipulate our desires. Their products are gradually rewiring our brains to addict us to our screens and make us more pliable to advertisers. But this is a big sign to what you're doing, isn't it? The social media companies haven't they been shutting down the Palestine websites?
They've been shutting them down left, right, and centre. In fact, Claudio Marte, who runs the I Am the Face of 9/11 Truth movement in America, had both his accounts shut down for absolutely no reason. That happened just the other day. The Palestinians, they're lucky if they stay up for any length of time at all, just for speaking the truth. Really, what you've got to realize is the front line of the dystopian state we're heading. The classic example, by the way, that firm Serco I mentioned, they also run the FEMA camps, the federal emergency camps, where they tend to intern people who won't take the vaccines, etc. But really, if you want to see the jackboot consistently stamping on the face of humanity, well, it's happening before your very eyes. Because
I mean, look at in September 2016, Al Jazeera reports Facebook blocks accounts of Palestinian journalists. Would you believe? In January 2017, Facebook closes accounts of Palestinian activists. That's the Middle East Monitor telling us about that. In 2019, November last year, Twitter suspends accounts of the Palestinian Quds News Network. Also, in 2019, Facebook takes down pages of Palestinian news sites on a separate story. And then Facebook deactivates dozens of accounts of Palestinians at the request of the Israeli government. That was just May 2020. So this is obviously a bit of an epidemic of the social media companies caving into pressure from the Israel lobby, and maybe actually quite willingly doing so. It seems they've got a very close relationship. Anyway, very best of luck with your charitable work in the future.
Thanks. Well, there's also War and Want. They've been hit, and Halaby, he's in jail. He's with World Vision, and he's been tried 23 times. Found not guilty, but they still won't let him out. That's World Vision, Halaby, and he's rotting in an Israeli dungeon as we speak, a Christian charity. And as I say, when you said to me, where is all this heading? Look what's happened in Palestine. It's the anvil of humanity, and they have been in so many different ways been used as the lab rats for new technologies, new weapon systems, all sorts of things. Even their organs are taken and used. I suspect Dick Cheney, who's had 3 heart transplants, it wouldn't surprise me if he's got a Palestinian one in there, because they're very strong-hearted people.
Okay. Mike Farah, thanks ever so much for your time.
It's a pleasure, and thank you, Tony, for spreading the truth. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you.